Hello, everyone, and welcome to Verte and the opening of our new website. We're meeting up today at the fifth conversation in a series that we had this week in the inauguration of our website. And Verte is a nomadic art institution, and since we don't have our own house, we use the website as our gathering point. So that was why we wanted to do these conversations, to actually start it off with having these very interesting people invited to talk about different things that will be interesting both for Verte and for our collaborators and the artists that we're working with. And Vertes, we want to work in different ways, but our most important thing that we are doing is to make the Sami presence visible, and we want to contribute to an everyday life and an history writing that contains Sami perspectives. And even though the Sami representation has improved in many ways and in a lot of contexts, there is still a big lack of understanding and sometimes also knowledge about the Sami culture and the history and the contemporary conditions that affects the possibility of actually continuing to practice and also develop the culture. So that is also something that we are interested in working with to improve. And this is also something that we see can reinforce somewhat of a we and them perspective when all of these things are going on. And also in the places where the Sami presence is clear and very present and has been existing for a long time and long before the social constructions as we know them today. And it is in these kind of places that Verte would like to work to make visible how the Sami life and Sami culture is an ongoing part of life. And also in these areas, it needs to be clear that this should be a part of a lot of different parts of life and work, and also a part of all the activities that we are doing. And I'm working together with Ellen Berit Dalbach, running Verte together with her. And we are working actually against 3 different target groups. One is the organizations we're working together with to make them have a more clear way of working with the Sami questions and learn more about it, even after we have left. So we are not working with only doing different small things like a project or an exhibition or something like that. We also want to work with their structures and how they're continuing the work after Verte leaves and after the collaboration with Verte is over. But of course, we also have a lot of thought about who we are inviting and the Sami artists, even though we can see today that a lot of Sami artists are being shown in a lot of different contexts, both in Sápmi, outside of Sápmi, internationally, nationally. We still see that there's a lot of Sami artists and a lot of Sami perspectives that are still lacking in the conversations and in what is being shown in the big institutions. So that is also something that we would like to contribute with, to make it a bit more visible how many different perspectives there actually are and how many different outputs there are. And also we are working with the public, of course, because one of the most important part of Verte is to actually create a platform where more Sami art and more Sami presence is visible in our daily life and in the spaces where we are gathering together. So that is also why we want to see the public meeting more of the Sami artists and the Sami art. And the beginning of Verte was possible thanks to the financing from Svenska Postkodstiftelsen, and the work has started as a part of Konstfrämjandet Norrbotten. And before we start, I just want to say if someone wants to ask a question during the conversation, that is possible. You need to go into our YouTube channel, and you find that little in the corner down in the corner of this website. You can see that you can click on that YouTube icon, and then you can also ask questions. And I will try to bring them up during the conversation if someone wants to do that. And for today's question, the last question suitably is about what will happen next. Not only for Verte, but for the Sami contemporary art and art as a whole. So that is something that I will talk together today with Dine, Liisa-Ravna and Suvi. But I would like you to introduce yourself a little bit. Maybe we'll start with you, Suvi.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. Yeah, my name is Dr. Suvi, and I'm a filmmaker. And well, I've been making films 20 years now, and yeah, it's my my passion to tell stories. I don't see myself only as a filmmaker because I think there's other forms of stories that I tell, but most of the times I choose film to be my way of tell stories. Right now, I'm developing a feature fiction film, and also writing a novel, which will be published in next May. So those are what I'm right now doing. And also I'm inviting a new story to come to me, or a new project come to me, because these are very slow processes. So I think it's really good to have multiple projects going on simultaneously, because it takes years. So, and now I'm in the stage that I'm really, yeah, I have more space for new ideas too. So I'm kind of like flirting and see who would be my next fling in a way. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Liisa-Ravna.
Uh, Hi everyone. I'm Liisa-Ravna Finbog. I love that introduction, Suvi. Um, I think so. At the moment, I'm actually in Oslo, in Norway, working at the Munch Museum as a curator for indigenous art. And before that, I was living in Finland, in Tampere, where I was doing a postdoc research position looking into art from a Sami perspective. So land-based aesthetic practices and how they can be employed to analyze or to look at the bigger picture. So I think, yeah, in general, that's maybe we can start there, and I'm sure I'll add to it during the conversation.
Dine.
I'm just going further then. My name is Dine Arnannguaq Fenger Lynge. I'm the CEO of Daitadallo Sami Artist Network here in Båetije, where I'm sitting right now. As I used to say, that our office is in Båetije, Norwegian side of Sami, but we have our workspace is the whole wide world. So last week, or the last weeks, I was in Canada, and now I'm sitting writing application for the department. So it's a very, very varied situation work that I have in this is in my farm. But Daitadallo is 10 years this year. It's a Sami artist network within, we have 21 artist partners within our organization, interdisciplinary. We work with different kind of themes. We're developing Sami production, Sami art production, but we also visibilizing and internationalization is one of the biggest work we do. So the part now where we work with, it's mostly going for the infrastructures and developing structures. As Verde is nomadic, we're kind of not nomadic, but we also work with a lot of big institutions nationally, internationally, and also researching. I would say researching, because that's what we do in this stage in Sápmi. We don't have any answers, because we just got the report from Truth and Reconciliation. So we're still in a research about capacity building in Sápmi. That's the mostly thing I do. I get a lot of inspiration from other cultures, networks, collaboration partners from other indigenous community, as Canada, Inuit from Canada. Yeah, so mostly that's what I do.
Yeah, thank you so much. So maybe in a little bit of to continue what you're talking about, Tina, that we maybe don't have all the answers, but with this day, it's also very big questions in the how it was introduced on the website, what we were going to talk about today. But I think it could be interesting hearing a little bit from each of you, if you have some kind of feeling of where do you see that the Sami art is going next? Maybe start with you then, Dine.
Yeah, thank you. It like hit me right back. Where is Sami? I think it's through my work and through the artist, we are going very fast in high speed towards a very big market in art in the internationally, and we have the spaces and positions internationally, but we also have a big work to do to bring it back. You said, Maria, a bit about we see more art in Sápmi. I feel that we see very little art in Sápmi, but mostly the art I see is international. It's abroad. It's export. So for me, it's very important that to work with the infrastructure. So we also have the possibility to work inside Sápmi to develop the art as we do internationally. So I think where the Sami art is going, that we are in a position that we are working on bringing it back to the knowledge and also the art, but also the knowledge against it. We are working on bringing it back to Sápmi, finding infrastructure, institutionalization, because we don't have anything in Sápmi. We don't have our own institution. Mostly art, Sami art, is export. So for me, it's very important that the Sami is very internationally, but we have to work towards to bring it back.
Yeah, Liisa-Ravna?
Yeah, I think one of the important things to sort of make clear from the get-go is that there are institutions in Sápmi doing this work. There are also individuals doing this work, and of course we need both, right? So in my position at the Munch Museum, I'm trying to get the institution to actually add on a permanent position of curator for indigenous art. And that's because I very strongly feel that in the context of the Nordic countries, one of the big problems is that we, as Sami scholars, academics, curators, artists, we're always brought in to make like this one-time event, one-time thing, and then we leave again, right? So while we might get paid to do that work, and while for the time period that we do work, we are enacting something, it doesn't necessarily lead to change in the infrastructure. And I think a lot of the sort of artistic projects that we see right now, both within our own context at home in Sápmi, but also outside of Sápmi, is very much about self-realization and self-determination. So in a sense, we are in the process of sort of defining what our art is and how it should be presented to the world and how it should be presented to us. But this is a very complex and layered process. So it's not as if we're only choosing one possibility. In fact, there are multiple possibilities. There are multiple positions and perspectives on this. And I think I like to look to so the genre of indigenous futurism, where you have this term futurity. So futurity is all about understanding that the future is made right now by the choices you make in present time. So you are essentially, with your actions today, putting down a foundation for the future, right? And I think in that case, what we are seeing, like Dine said, is working hard to change and shift perspectives and infrastructure, which, yeah, it's something that I don't think, well, depending on the form, like depending on my day form, sometimes I think, oh yeah, this is going really great. And other days I'm like, oh no, this is impossible. I'm never going to see any change happen in my lifetime. So I guess it is. We're basically, I would say sometimes I feel as if we're marathon runners, but the marathon never ends.
Okay, Suvi, but how about you?
Yeah, I totally agree with the Liisa-Ravna and also Dine. I think there we're talking about two different levels. There's this level that Sami art inside the Sami, and then the international Sami art. And I think those sometimes are two different things. They can be same thing, but sometimes they are two different things. And sorry. So I really like the idea of bringing the art back, and that's something that I've been also a lot of been thinking because now it seems, and it's been since the beginning in a way, that Sami art seems to be appreciated inside the Sami community if it's been internationally acclaimed. And that tells the story for me that about the self-esteem, like the Sami people's self-esteem is so bad that we need outside people's validation to appreciate our own art. And also it twists us a little bit the art making if we always have to think first that how this will make to the A-list film festivals or like these huge art biennales and these places. And then we also lose opportunities to talk to our own people, because art can actually be a good tool to have like this social tool discussions that we need to have inside the community, and we don't need to maybe have those conversations in front of everybody. But we lack that if we always aim to the international markets. And I put my gaze to Sami society then, and also institutions and Sami media, who we always lift up in the media. Only those artists who win international prizes or domestic prizes, and we don't like appreciate so much these artists who make local art, or like the Sami, where they talk only to the Sami people. And I think that's something that I have been thinking like for many years already. And then that's of course the other question: if we want to make it internationally, what we need then? That's another conversation. But maybe I will pass my to someone else. But yeah, I totally like the idea that please bring the Sami art only, so we can like we don't, that we can only love the Sami art despite what other people say about it.
I saw that you wanted to say something, Dine.
Yes, I don't know how to
Go ahead.
dance a bit to react. No, I think it's also one thing, it's maybe also to consideration what you're talking about, Suvi, is how Sami people react upon art and toward Western society. It's very different, because also like when we talk about biejjieh art as a tool, art has always been a tool, or the art has always been the tool. It's in, and I can see it back in Greenland too, and especially when we talk about data questions, that often the Sami society don't see the art as the Western society sees. So we don't have the same approach that internationally art scenes like the Venice Biennale or the biggest. It's not normally, I think it's a balance, that because we also have to work within our society and community to see how to present it, because we can't actually just don't have the same way to show art in our communities to approach the community. So it's very important to also maybe define it a bit within our societies. What do we want to see, and how are we want to see, or how do we want to use art? Often from the historical basic timeline of indigenous art isn't like something you just have to look at. It's something you have to touch, or something you have to work with at some point. So it's a very interesting way to see when we're trying to define what we don't have. I especially don't see that the normal typical galleries will work here as in same if it's nothing happens and is not interdisciplinary. It's not only a gallery. So I think it's a very important to how do you call forankre det? English people forankre det.
To convey it, or like anchor it, or like.
Is it?
No, I don't know. But I guess people get what we're meaning at least.
I'm sorry, my English is a bit bad, but you have to like figure out in the communities, also cross the borders, Sápmi, what is art for us and how do we want? I would like to have a almost kind of production center of art where people can play with the materials, then going into a gallery just to look at the art. So I think it's, yeah, bringing back, but then also talking to the communities in Sápmi, but how, I don't think it's the same. From my point of view, it's not the same what we want from the Western societies to bring it back to Sápmi. So that's also one case.
But also I was thinking about now when you're talking, the first conversation that was held this week with Petra and Maria, they talked also about the quick tempo that is going on, and it's a little bit like about what you're also talking about, Liisa-Ravna, the somewhat of the definition of what the Sami art is, that when it goes very quickly, maybe it's not the definition of what it is, even if it even necessary, or do we want to do it, but it's often done by someone else from the outside. Do you see this as a risk somehow, when it's also is like this is happening now, the Sami artists and art are so present like everywhere, and it has to happen now? Do you see something?
Well, I think so. I think the problem here is that we need to understand the context of our own positionality, in the sense that, from a Sami perspective, there are Sami ways of knowing, there are Sami ways of being, and there are Sami ways of doing, right? So what in a Western terminology would be epistemology, so knowledge systems, ontology, like ways of reality, and then axiology, so ways of doing, values and meanings. And oftentimes what we see, and like what I myself have experienced working in international context, or Norwegian, Swedish, Finnish context, is that oftentimes when we enter into a project, the already there is a slight shift in, like, we don't understand something the same way. We might think that we do. So I might go into a meeting and I will say something, say something about so art and so on and so forth. But my perspective of art is very different. So the Sami perspective on art, as Dine says, is very different from what you would understand it to be in a Western context. The problem is that when the Western context is sort of the value foundation for projects, what happens is that we need to work to, or what happens is that we often work to shift our perspectives to more align with a Western perspective, to get somehow, well, to get space, basically. So we're doing sort of this difficult maneuvering, where we constantly have to be 110% on, thinking all the time, how can I best word this so that someone will understand the importance of it, right? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The problem then is that, like Suvi says, I remember during the Venice Biennale, right? I was one of the co-curators for the Sami Pavilion, and I remember looking at the difference in media, how media responded. So in Norway and Sweden and Finland, there was hardly anything, right? We weren't we weren't on the news, we weren't being written about. And then you look to international media, and the Sami Pavilion was one of the hottest things. Everyone wanted a piece of the Sami Pavilion, just not in Norway or Sweden or Finland. And then what happens after you see the commercial success of Sami art outside of these colonial borders of Norway, Sweden, Finland? I always skip Russia because I feel it's difficult to bring Russia into the conversation, because they never cared about, they don't even care about their sort of official positioning in the world on indigeneity. But the problem, of course, is that, again, because we don't have the infrastructure, we are always struggling. We're always sort of racing to make ourselves and our art fit into something already existing, and that which is already which is already in existence, does often doesn't care to make room for the specific needs of not only Sami but indigenous art in general, right? So and these, like, of course, this is when sometimes my days go like, ah, this is never going to change. But then you can be surprised as well. Sometimes there are people, I think we tend to forget that we always talk about institutional problems, and then we tend to forget that, well, an institution is basically its people. If the people that make up the institution are willing to enact change, then that leaves space and room for us to come in and make that change. But in most cases, I would say that what often happens is that we enact some change within our own communities, and then we try and bring that change with us. Like, and it can be small things. For instance, when I was doing a lot of freelance work before I took my present position at Munch, I had like this list. I called it my protocol list. It was a list of things that I could accept within a position or a project. And then there are points where I was very clear from the first communication that these are things that I will never agree with. This goes against all my principles as a human being, but also as a Sami person. So, and so a lot of the time, starting a new project for me meant bring this list and have a conversation on it. And sometimes people would say, oh, well, we can't really accommodate that specific, we can't accommodate that. And then I would say, well, that's fine, but then I cannot work for you or with you. But again, I don't know. I don't like to sort of portray the victim or sort of victimize the Sami people in general. But of course, there is this element of struggle when we think about creating understanding of art, of Sami art within a Sami context outside of Sápmi, and then also trying to create that same understanding within our own communities. I think, for instance, film is a very good example of how this works, because if you think about it, traditionally, from old times, aesthetic practices, so iconography, images, like what we would today maybe term art, or for that matter, what we would term biejjieh, is all about, was in a way also our literature, right? So we were writing our histories and our documentations of law into the practices, into the aesthetic forms. And I've just been looking at, like, I've been going through Sami short films for a presentation, and what strikes me is how different Sami short films can be from Norwegian short films, because there is an element to the storytelling that happens in Sami short films that just doesn't exist in Norwegian short films or Swedish or Finnish, because two completely different traditions are being enacted within that medium, within that format. And then, yeah, I don't know, maybe Suvi has some input on this, because I often feel as if film is a good way of sort of making this a difference, because when you show a Sami short film, some Sami audience member often have a very different understanding of what is happening. They view it differently because they can understand the complexity of the multiple layers, whereas someone from outside Sami community will perhaps only see one thing, and that will be sort of the understanding of the film's narrative. Whereas we know the narrative is actually narratives, because it happens in multiple forms. And I think the same is true for art, right? And I think this sometimes allows us to maneuver these very difficult waters, because we can we can have art and we can present it and it can be this outer layer, but then we understand that there are multiple layers beneath that uppermost layer. And then the question is, how do you mediate that, or do you? I don't know. This is where, of course, infrastructures. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit because I'm thinking out loud.
Well, that's really nice to think out loud. Yeah, film is. I think there's, because when we talk about art, that's a umbrella of art, like different way of telling, making art. There's like contemporary art, there's a music, there's a literature, there's a film, and so on. Of course, film is the most familiar for me, and I have to say that when we talk about short films, they are different thing than feature films, both and fiction, because a short film, you can be experimental and you can do, well, sometimes you are given chance to do whatever you want to do. It's also much easier to control. But when we talk about feature films, then we're talking about, then industry comes in, and then there's a lot of money involved, and it's really difficult to get that money. And when that comes, then you are not that free anymore. It means not only industry-wise and capitalistic-wise, but also like storytelling-wise. You cannot be like I love to work with the anecdotes, work with the circle kind of thinking, and like challenge the Aristotle's way of telling stories. And that's why I love writing novels, because you can do that more. But in film, it's really, you can do that, but at the same time, the film needs so constructive, like the form. Otherwise, you will lose viewers. You can do that, but many times they're really art house films, and then they are not the films that you will be seeing in the cinemas, or like a lot of people will see, and a lot of people will pay to see. And right now, when there is this money question, when we talk about film, there's like this kind of involvement, like evolution in Sami films, that Sami, being a Sami and Sami culture was a selling point maybe 7 years ago. People talked about it's a trendy and like, there's a wave and things like that. But now when we have had these Sami films in Nordic countries, now the Sami, being a Sami and Sami culture is a curse word in the film industry, because it's not a selling point anymore. So right now, if you want to make feature Sami films, leave the Sami word away from there, because that could because Sami films have never been, they've been artistically high level, but they are not the films that people will buy tickets to go and see. And that's why there's a lot of distributors, producers who are a little bit scared to jump on board if they are Sami film. So like I was pitching in Högesund this August, our film, and I said to my producer, let's not use word Sami, because for me it's not a Sami film. For me it's a film. For me it's not a Sami story. It's a story, and it's a universal story. So I also said to my producer that it's not a selling point anymore, and it was true. And after when we pitched, then there was like distributors who came to us. Oh, first I thought that this is just a family story, and we were like, no, we're not gonna take it. But then we understood it. Oh, this is a huge story. So and that's and when I started to make films, I remember how we approached industry was this Sami angle, like, hi, this is a Sami filmmaker making a Sami story. And back then it was a selling point. But now we have to also have this evolution as storytellers and artists, that we don't see ourselves as a Sami filmmakers or Sami storytellers, only like a universal storytellers. And it's a liberating. For me, it's a liberating, and I love it that I can be filmmaker and I can be storyteller instead of trying to be like this Sami person who comes to the industry. So yeah, I think there's good things and bad things, and yeah, it's not, even though Sami is not selling point right now, in film world, maybe it's in contemporary art world, maybe it's a music world, I don't know, but not in film. I think in literature right now it's okay, but maybe not in the future. Let's see how the Sami books will sell, like Nordic places. So yeah, these are all these kind of like movements that go. Sometimes it's good to be Sami, sometimes it's not good to be Sami, but if you're a storyteller, artist, musician, author, you will manage to do that still, because in the end we're just artists and storytellers.
Yeah, Dine, go.
Yes, yeah, Suvi, I'm a bit surprised by this, that in 7 years the Sami film hasn't like distributed while we have had this big productions in Sápmi within this 7 years. Like if you think about The Stolen, if you think about all the films, Oru Jaska, who had the latest, like I'm not, that would be because I had this conversation with the Danish Film Institute man in Denmark, because it's within my family, and he said exactly the same like 4 years ago. But then like last year, 2 years ago, I could go back to him and show them Stolen and said that it isn't quite true that we finished with this story. I think with more history we get from this side of the story, and it was the same lame story. We are fed up looking at the reindeers in the screens, and but for me, from my perspective, it wasn't. That was his word, maybe from his vote, that they want to combine like not funding this kind of films, but we talked about he was wrong, because the publicum, the viewers of this film is so high these past 4 years. It's up to the viewers, and then you can strengthen up the storytelling part, because that's the essence of the Sami. From my perspective, I'm not a filmmaker, but for me it was like a bit like distance between what you said and what I'm feeling Sami film has made. And if you see the ESFE, and that's a very good example how we talk about infrastructure and capacity building.
Yeah.
If you give money, resources to a Sami Film Institute, you as a free Sami can like produce without having this content with this big financing, because they are the power structures. The money people are, the funding people are the money, and they can literally say anything to you and you can hop on it, kind of. That's my experience with this funding situation. And then when we talk about a bit, that's why it's very important that we talk about infrastructure, building up structures that so Sami art and Sami artists can be free. Because we as the settlers, or not the settlers, but we as peers who make production administrative work normally are not the artists, but we have to work so the artists, filmmakers can be free to make their film, telling the stories, and just like a good example of ESFE. What happens when we actually give resources to organization in Sápmi? I really feel that we have to build up so you guys, you artists can be forced to be free. And when it comes to activism, artist activism and artists, it's not upon us, it's upon the artists. Even though if you are a Sami or North or indigenous artist, you have to be free to make your art. And that's our work in this kulisset, or the behind the scenes, is to make this infrastructure, building up the society so we can make more art. And we can't control the art internationally. That's upon the artists. We have to be behind the artists, going internationally, being like there to find how are we going to have a role in this international market, because they are actually listening to us. And that's why Maria and they talking about is going very fast. But the time is now. We have to act fast if we want to be a part of the boat now. So yes, unfortunately, the actions is happening now when it comes to truth and reconciliation, our connection to the world, our access to other indigenous communities, problems. And that's also the bit dangerous part, because we also the trend is to adapt another indigenous problems. And we really have to be careful, because we don't have the same story, colonial story within our stories, and even more we're trying to fight the same structures. We have to really work within our societies to fight against the structure, you know? It has to be like from a society perspective. And so, and that's also internationally, it's a bit dangerous when we talk about Sami art as a one thing internationally. It's not the one thing. It's different kind of artists, biejjiehs, who's working in different kind of communities in the whole wide world. So often we are also trying to put art in a box. But for me, it's so important to work so art can be free for the Sami artists. And that's only, from my perspective, is to build up infrastructures in Sápmi.
But do you see anything, Dine, about like could it be an issue or a problem with, because I often hear this and I do it myself also, of course, we talk about it as one Sami art and one Sami way of, so like I think is there a point of it being a lot of different ways working at the same time, and that maybe someone really wants to go do this international thing and someone doesn't want to leave their home village, and someone, because I think that is also a problem that we have slowly slipped into, maybe not by our own choices, but someone else's, that we're talking about it as one, that there's one Sami community, one Sami art, one Sami, yeah. Do you see that as something that could make it a bit harder, like adapting, so it doesn't also get to be a bit of a very narrow space to get through as an artist? Either you're a Sami artist or you're not, because you're not filling the credentials of someone else.
If I understood your question, I will answer no, really, really fast, because you said something that that's also when we talk about transforming institution, it's also a bit misunderstood word. As we talked about in Canada in 2 weeks, then transforming is not about us. It's about the institution to transform their own knowledge. We can refill, because we are such a small organization within the Sami, and peers, individual persons, because that's actually how the art society is built about now. It's more individual freelancers than they are in collectives or united. But if you see other indigenous, they are almost only collectives and networks, because they are trying to figure out how to build a band. In Sami, we are so far away from each other also by the borders, unfortunately. Often we can't navigate. So the important is to navigate within ourselves, like now, where this conversation is amazing, because it's feeling like that almost the first time I have been invited to an inner Sami. Of course, we have Kultur Sápmi, but in this kind of organizations we do. But it's not about us to do the transforming in this big that's the resource. We don't have the resources by money, we don't have the resource by peers, and this big institution like the national museums and Munch, it's too big for us to navigate around to change things. So the transforming things have to happen with this institution, and we have to have some time to build up how to present this knowledge to this institution. So we have to build up on our society to give this institution. So no, we don't likely not now have the resources to make the changes in the big institution. Unfortunately not. But Liisa-Ravna said something which is also good, like she does in Munch, that they have to hire Sami peers in the process. They have to, but then again, we don't have not that many Sami curators. We don't have not that many Sami museums. How do you call it? Museum workers or the structure. So we have a lot of needs we have to build up within our society before we can go to the institution and say this is how we work, if it makes sense.
You wanted to jump in, Liisa-Ravna, so.
Yes, a couple of things. First, just to make a note that I think we're talking also of different things, because as I understand Suvi, she was talking about working as an individual freelancer, as an artist, whereas Dine very much comes from the space of being sort of the apparatus behind the artist, working to support and connect and build up structures to help the artist. So that's two very different positions, which means that I also think we will see two very different ways of working, right? Because what I feel Suvi is talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel we're talking about how do we market ourselves as artists with it, trying to get work, and then in an institutional or infrastructural way of thinking, it's more about how can we build upon what we already have to create the institutions and the structures that can aid our artists and our, like, I'm just going to call them artists, and then we insert whatever into that sort of overall term. Um, and so I agree that it's not upon us to enforce change, but change cannot happen if we are not there to offer solutions. So this needs to be a process that have multiple access points, I at one point I would, whenever I was asked, because I was educated as a museologist, so a museum science basically, and whenever someone asked me, well, do you want to work in a museum? My answer was always no. I want to do research on phenomena connected to museum. I don't want to work in that then, because that I feel is too difficult. And now where I'm in the position that I'm actually working within a museum, um, I'm limited in what I can do within that box, but what I can do, I do. And it can be small things. It can be insisting that whenever communication go out, so right now I'm working on an exhibition that will open in 2026 with the Jon Savius art. And so one of the things that I can do in that project is insisting that we collaborate with Sami knowledge keepers, that we employ Sami language in all our communication. So everything should be Norwegian, English, and Sami, right? So these are small things that I can do as an individual within an organization to enact change, but I can't actually go in and switch up the whole structure. I don't have that possibility. This is where structures such as Daidadalu come into play, and other like collectives, because they create new ways of thinking structures in the work that they do. And the work that they do is quite often it grows from the needs of the artists. So it's a more organic, it's a more collaborative way of thinking change, and it's not something that you can actually just do in your, like, Daidodalo can't just, oh, we're gonna, like, this is the change and now we want to see it in every institution. But you're laying groundwork, right? You're laying down some structures and necessary paths that enable and help artists to better do what they want to do, to better have artistic freedom. So I think, if we look at the whole landscape of Sami art, every voice matters. It doesn't need to be in agreement, but every voice matters, because every voice, regardless if that is a practitioner, an artist such as Suvi, if that is a curator working within a non-Sami institution such as myself, or if that is someone like Dine working administratively to create Sami structures or a Sami organizational model, all of those voices together implore. Maybe that's, well, not implore, I don't like that as well, but we all enact change just by simply living our life and doing the work that we do. And then hopefully at some point, the institutions we work with, or within, from in my case, will see the necessity of that change, right? And so they will then, on management level, take that need and enact it within their structures. I should say that, I think that is not a process that we've really begun to see come together in the context of the Nordic countries. But, who knows what the future will bring? I think it can. Yeah, sorry, you.
No, yeah, but I would also just say, I see that Dina would like to jump in, but just
Yeah.
to catch in, Dina, I also would, I'm thinking
No,
like
I
it
was just,
could also be,
just listening, so I
yeah,
was
it could also be a little bit difference of like when you say no, because as an institution or like even as a small institution as Verte, we have through our board and through our like settings of
Yeah.
what we are supposed to do and what we have this somewhat of a rule book that we're following. So sometimes it's easy to say no because it's not what we are supposed to work with. That is not what we want to do. So saying no is not always that hard, but when I'm working as a freelancer or like for an artist, it could also be hard sometimes to not to step away from money or a possibility or like a opportunity. And of course, as you talking about Liisa-Ravna, this that you maybe not will change the world overnight, but this feeling that also reminding yourself that even if you do take baby steps, there's still steps towards something that you're interested in. But I don't know, do you think anything about that, Dina?
Yeah, I just have to like say that I don't say no to not to collaborate because we have to do that to make this change. But the question was if our role to have this responsibility to make the change within this institution, no, because we don't have the resources and we don't have had the time to figure out. But we are on our way, I feel, to figure out somehow, like. The new thing that you talk about, Liisa-Ravna, it's also this nothing about us without us rule.
Yeah.
Have in this kind of world, and it's true, but it can also be in very different kind of ways to do this. But in institutions now, also in the truth and reconciliation, now also giving more, like I think the resources coming to make the infrastructures, but I'm afraid that the resource is not upon us. We're going to have more to do without any, because now the system is this. Often we get hired or making collaboration, for example, to the national museums, and then our work is to bring the art back, or we can learn, or we can exchange knowledge with this national institution or other galleries who's going to do the same thing within the Sami. I think it's very important in this kind of that we have to be this. We have to be there to maybe also navigate, but we are not in the part where Canada is, where they have already figured out. We are in the start of, Canada is 7 years ahead of us, and we are 7 years, yeah, but in this truth and reconciliation. So we can adapt so many things because we haven't find a solution within our society yet. And that's also to the national institutions.
Well, but I think, when you say nothing about us without us, I think that is a good start. I mean, I recognize that for many institutions, it is also problematic. I've experienced when I was working in universities, right? And I was primarily doing research, but I was also doing teaching. I was also teaching. And one of the issues that I came across was being accused. Like I've been accused of being difficult to work with because I've always been very like clear on if you're doing a research project, if you're exploring Sami culture or phenomena in Sami culture, you can't do that just the way you want. You need to actually bring in Sami people to the project. And for a lot of people in Norwegian, this happened in Norway, someone can say Norwegian academia, but it's true also in the case of Swedish or Finnish. That becomes problematic because what we're essentially talking about is refusing someone to take ownership over us and our culture and our history, right? And that becomes problematic because up until the 1980s, no one, would argue on who owned the Sami people, insert whatever, whether that be the people, the culture, the language, the music. It was considered to be the common property of the colonial national states. And then comes the period, well, it began even earlier, but then in the 80s, it kind of exploded where Sami people were like, no, you can't own us. We're going to own ourselves. We're going to own our own culture. And yet, still, like today, and we're almost 50 years later, it's still considered problematic in certain contexts when Sami people say, I'm going to own this. I'm going to be I'm going to be everything I can be on my own terms. I'm going to own it. And this is again, Dina says 7 years. I would say maybe 20 or 30 years. But I'm also thinking academia here because I remember when I was doing my PhD and I did it at the university in Oslo, like people would question me when I said that I'm going to do this research. It's going to be on a Sami issue. It's going to be based on Sami methodology. I'm going to go all out. And people were questioning my right to do so. Because, like, one of the things, of course, that I was asked was whether or not I, as a Sami person, could be objective doing research on my own communities. Like, a Norwegian person doing research on a Norwegian community would never be asked that same question because it's a given that a Norwegian or a Swede or a Finn can be objective, whereas a Sami person obviously cannot be because we're too emotional and fueled by, activist needs or whatnot. So that is one problem within academia that often makes it much more difficult for us to articulate Sami knowledges and sort of disseminate it out into the public because we have to fight really hard within academia. And what Dina was saying earlier about like we don't have that many curators, we don't have Sami curators in a large sense. We don't have like Sami museum workers. And well, while it's true that we don't have that there is few Sami people that have been educated within curatorial practice at university or sort of college level or museology at university or college level. I do think we have those knowledges within our communities. The problem is that we just haven't been able to articulate it and present that in a way that sort of makes it known outside of our communities. And I think that often is also one of the problems that we see when we think about art and exporting art, which Dina rightfully says is what we do. We export Sami art, right? That's what we do. Often the problem is that there's just we have curators, but they might not define themselves as being a curator because the practice that they do is completely different from what you would expect a curator in the National Gallery, for instance. So
that's also the point. Like, I just want to answer that, like, in my last, like, curations, and that's what we also talk about in a bit in Canada. What is a curator? Because it's not the same as a set educated Western curator. That's the production, the thing. But then you have a lot of things which was very interesting to talk about. And also in the Sami society, when you are not the Western educated curator, when do you become a curator? And who decides that you are the curator of the Sami society? We have done a lot of programming, but I will never call me a curator, like kind of, because I don't think that's, I think we have a talk to do there too.
yeah, I agree. I think we definitely need to start defining positions and terms within the art scene, and sort of make that also known outside of the Sami art scene.
Yeah, and I think that this is time is running up. it's already 1 o'clock, and this has been super interesting. Could continue for a long time, but I would just like to wrap it up by hearing a little bit from each of you, like what, like for you, for instance, Suvi, what is it that right now is inspiring you looking forward? What is it that you see that it's like, this is something that you're excited for, continuing working as an artist?
Well, yeah, I think that there was this thing that happened to me a few years ago. I felt like this, well, for me, like making art or telling stories is, like I've been saying before, it's like a spiritual practice. For me, it's like the place how I practice my spirituality. And it's my communication with the ancestors and also spirits around. And a few years ago, I experienced that kind of the storytelling and art liberated me from a lot of expectations, including that I should be certain kind of like a storyteller, like being a Sami storyteller, and I just became a human being, and so I'm excited about that, because, and it doesn't mean that I don't tell Sami stories or Sami related stories or use Sami language or locate my stories in Sami culture, but it's just that I just can't be, I'm pretty much flying high all the time. So, and I believe that we have the power and strength to determine ourselves, our realities. Of course, I know that world is collapsing and there's like a apocalyptics coming and so on, genocides going on, and no money for at all in a Finnish society, at least. But still, in a way, when we focus on like just breathe the art or breathe the story, it's the most beautiful feeling. And I really hope that, I know also that I'm really in a privileged position in a way, but this didn't happen like this. I mean, it took 20 years to reach this place. So I know that this is not reality for all filmmakers or storytellers or artists, but right now I'm enjoying that position that I can only focus on like the pure storytelling, pure art making.
Yeah, but that's a good words to end with, I would say. And I'm thanking you so much for taking the time. I think that this just means that we have needs for a lot of more of these conversations in different constellations and continue these conversations with each other. And thank you everyone for being a part of this week of conversations. And I hope that you follow Berta and what we are continuing to do. So thank you. Have a great day.
Bye, you too. Thank you.